All right, and we are recording this event this evening. We are also streaming live on YouTube on the AWE YouTube page. So you're all here, so that's what's important. But there will be some other places where this content is going to be available. That being said, why don't we get started? It's an interesting topic. We've got some folks kind of joining us from all over the world, and it's very very early and very late for some of us. So why don't we begin? Thank you everyone for joining us for the April. Should have been March, but due to some scheduling, we decided to push it to April because we're so passionate about this topic. Edition of AWE Nite LA. My name is Raymond Moscow. I'm one of the organizers of AWE Nite LA. Susan Olsolin is also one of the co-orgs. And one other person I really want to introduce is Sergio Andrade, one of our volunteers. Who it is because of him really that this event happened. Serge is a passionate audiophile, really excited about the spatial audio space, and we've gotten a lot of requests for an audio event from you, our audience, and Serge was really passionate about this and put it on his back and made this happen. So it's because of him that this event is happening. So thank you, Serge. I think this is going to be an exciting event.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, definitely. So that being said, if you attending these events, you have interest in specific topics, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook, reach out to us in our mailing list and Meetup, and let us know these things so that we can start we can build content around your interests. I'm going to switch to speaker view now as we begin. And I think that we're one of the other things we're really excited about this evening is that typically it's myself or it's Susan that is hosting these events, but tonight we've reached into our community here in Los Angeles and found someone that I've known to be really passionate and has great expertise in regards to this, Hayden McGill, to join us this evening to host this incredible panel. So why don't I turn it over to you, Hayden, and why don't you get us started?
Great. Thanks so much, Ray. And thanks for asking me to be a part of this panel. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Hayden McGill. I'm the founder of Nocturnal. We're a spatial audio studio based out of Los Angeles. We started designing for 360 video, and then that quickly morphed into working on VR and AR projects, and then transforming that into working on installations and interactive artworks as well. So we've got a lot of content to get through tonight. I know there must be a lot of good questions too coming from the audience. So let's hop right in and we'll do some speaker intros. So I'll pass the mic over to you, Jacqueline.
Oh, no pressure. Hi, everybody. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mark One. My name's Jacqueline Boshniak. I'm actually in New York at the moment. Mark One is a sound technology company that was born while we were working on XR projects where directors demanded high quality spatial sound for us, as well as sort of complete creative control, the same standards that they had come to expect from film. We wanted to be able to bring ourselves as craftsmen or women into this medium that was emerging, where sound was suddenly critical for maintaining immersion. And that sort of became our spiritual mission, is like, how do we become, our mission was defenders of the audio realm, to create tools that brought our craft and traditional sound production pipeline into XR. So we early on worked on quite a few different VR projects, like The Martian or Alien VR with 20th Century Fox, or De Angelica with Oculus Story Studios, Mr. Robot with Sam Ishmael, are some of the projects that we sort of cut our teeth with. And I think it was this iteration loop of being frustrated that we couldn't bring our full creativity into this medium that led to the birth of Mark One. And so Mark One, what we've done is we've introduced a simple and transparent framework for unifying all multi-channel and spatial audio for both creators and developers. We have Mark One Spatial System, which is a workflow tool that works with any DAW for audio professionals to immediately extend and unlock their craft into these new mediums. And then we have the Mark One Spatial SDK, which is APIs for enabling developers to harness their control of audio pipelines using our libraries. And so we've positioned ourselves to become the sort of spatial audio delivery format, audio framework and advisor for the next computing platform. And I feel like, you know, it was really, we were sort of reluctant software developers, and it really was just luck where, you know, where they say opportunity meets preparation, and, you know, necessity really is sometimes the mother of invention. So that's how we landed up having a spin-off software company. I'm happy to be here with everybody else.
Great, thanks so much. And let's go to Joel.
Hi everyone, my name's Joel Dueck. I'm a film and television composer and co-founder of Echo VR, which is a company dedicated to sound and music, not just in VR anymore, but in VR, AR, and XR. And we also specialize in volumetric audio capture. My own background is also in neuroscience as well as music. And it felt since kind of 2015, when VR was rearing its head again, that this was a natural extension for myself and my partner in Echo VR to kind of just explore. And, you know, there were kind of heady days where we didn't have good tools. We didn't have Mach 1, you know, we didn't have a lot of stuff. And so we had to kind of figure things out the hard way, but always driven by the belief that VR is not just a typical form of media, but that it goes far, far beyond that. And our, you know, necessity that the audio that was being put into these kinds of experiences function properly and maintain the illusion, and that's not what was happening right at the beginning. People would put in stereo, and then say you turn your head, and someone who's speaking here is now speaking there, but visually they're still there. It didn't seem to bother a lot of people at the time, but it bothered us, and so we started a company, and it's grown from there, and we've kind of run the gamut of all kinds of VR and AR and volumetric projects, from kind of major Hollywood studios to tons of companies in the US and abroad. And similarly to Hayden, we found ourselves kind of a little bit having to move into location-based entertainment, but it's actually a fun place to be and a growing place to be, and we're really trying to own it. So that's me.
Thanks, Joel. And let's pop over to Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Poulier. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm building my 15th company now, after decades of getting into various types of companies, from enterprise software to security to music. But now is the most interesting of all of them from my view. It's a company that started 5 years ago, really focused on the idea of creating objects that would be authenticated and unique digital objects that could be experiential and have 3D graphics, animation, and sound. Eventually that became known as the NFT space, as the notion of having a unique object on blockchain became more popular. And what we've done over the years is make sure that these objects come alive in a way that's truly experiential in AR and VR. And one of the missing pieces to really make this come alive was the idea of spatial audio that I really learned from Philip Rosedale, who's also on the line here. Sure, I was familiar with it, and sure, I was experimenting with it, but it wasn't until I understood the power of what Philip was doing, how much it really would matter to do it well. And High Fidelity does it extremely well. In fact, order of magnitude better than anyone else. So when we integrated that into our system, and we were able to kind of complete the loop, what we have now, we believe, is really represents the evolution of the World Wide Web, a website where you can come in socially together, bring your objects, and then have them and have people experience the kind of serendipity and adventure that can occur in a website as you move seamlessly between AR and VR. And the key to feeling that you're there really is the sound. Yes, we have 3D graphics and animation. And yes, we have avatars and video and all sorts of other things, but it's the sound that tricks the brain into thinking the real world is real and the now extended world is real. And that's We have to thank Philip for that, but that's what you can check out at spatialweb.net, and that's what we're building.
Great, thanks, Eric. And that's a perfect segue to toss it over to Philip.
Hi, everyone. I'm Philip Rosedale. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of High Fidelity. And prior to that, I'm the founder and was formerly the CEO of Second Life, or Linden Lab that made Second Life. So I've been working on virtual worlds my whole career. And most recently, and subject of tonight, I've been focusing, thank you, Eric, as he was saying, on creating spatial audio technology that works live for a lot of people at the same time. That is the thing that we do here, and that hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about tonight. Thank you.
Great, and over to Alice.
Hi everybody, my name's Alice. I am a London-based composer for theatre and audio and film, and I also make theatre and also do some environmental campaigning within that. So I am part of a cohort called New Voices, which is run by Sound and Music, which is a UK-based charity for new music and sound. And through that, they're supporting me do a project over the next year where I'm going to be exploring plant-generated music, which is where you can make music from the bioelectric signals that plants make, and how that can then be created into an interactive and immersive experience for listeners, whether that's through digital kind of experiences online or through walking through botanical gardens and kind of experiencing the sounds pop up as they walk around the space. I've also had some experience in binaural audio, so I did the composition and sound design for a 4-part audio series, which was supported by the National Youth Theatre in the UK and the BBC Writers' Room. And I'm also, hopefully, depending on funding, creating a binaural sound walk in London later this year. This week, I am working on a VR project with my theatre company, where we are taking one of our old shows and putting it in a 360 VR space. And yeah, and then also a lot of my work focuses on climate change. So one of my frequent collaborators is a writer called Laura Grace Simpkins, and with her we explore neurodiversity and how that relates to the environmental sector, and also just different kind of environmental issues. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Great, thanks everyone. As you can see, everyone's covering, we've got artists, we've got founders, so we've got a lot of ground to cover. And first off, I'd love to even just get into some descriptions of what is spatial audio. I came from a background in film where you do traditional sound design, you've got multi-channel formats, but there was a learning curve, there was a bit of a jump. Getting into some of these spatial formats and trying to figure out how to plug that into current or existing workflows. So Joel, would you be able to start breaking that down for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if people, obviously are very clear about what stereo is, 2 speakers along basically a left and right. So just one axis. Surround sound, we added some speakers around the back, but it's still on that same horizontal plane. Newer forms of surround sound like Dolby Atmos and IMAX 11.1 have added, some speakers on the top, the voice of God. Fundamentally, in the most basic way, when we talk about spatial audio, we just are talking about audio which is perceived to have an orientation in 3 possible axes. And so that's the left and the right, the up and down, and the front and the back. Now, there's another aspect of spatial audio which is kind of worth understanding or worth grappling with, which is that until we kind of enter into spatial audio, we're either dealing with speakers that are in position, in a fixed position, and are delivering audio from that direction, or in headphones where you're listening to things in stereo. Once we move into spatial audio, the headphone-based experience is one that maintains a sense of the 360 by using a variety of psychoacoustic techniques to still transmit the sense. And we've probably all had that kind of, the haircut experience on YouTube or something like that, when you hear things kind of going behind you and all of that. So that's a binauralized spatial audio. And then when we would open it out to a speaker-based system, really we destroy the idea of the audio being speaker dependent at all. You still have speakers, obviously, that are going to reproduce that sound, play that sound, but where they are, where they're positioned, and how the sound responds in spatial audio is no longer a factor. It's no longer a limiting factor. We think in terms of a 360 sphere of sound, whether it's in headphones or whether it's in a space.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Do we have any other spatial audio definitions that we'd like to throw into the ring as well?
I could jump in. Oh, go ahead.
Please. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm not a composer or sound designer myself, but I always explain it in layman terms as the rewilding of your ears. I feel like we've been locked in the tyranny of stereo for so long, and blocked by technology. And this is sort of unblocking that. And it's sort of the rewilding of your ears so you can hear naturally. There should be like riots in the streets just because, we've crossed this barrier. Similar to, when the Artist Manifesto happened, when people added noise as music, there was sort of riots in the streets. I feel like, spatial audio really has sort of brought about that moment where we finally escape the tyranny of locked stereo.
I love that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also, because I think we can all stand to hear this repeated and repeated. And I think us as audio people, in spatial audio, in the VR and AR and XR world, find ourselves having to become evangelists for what 360 audio really represents. But if you think about it, hearing is our only true 360 sense. And there's a reason for that. We're evolutionarily wired to use audio as our primary survival tool. So there could be a herd of wildebeest, coming towards you, and you don't know that until you see them, if you only have your eyes, by which time it's too late. But with hearing, which is an evolutionary step up from vibration, but now the vibrations are triggered inside our eardrum, we are able to detect things that are happening in any direction. And what's important to understand is that message, that information is wired to the subconscious parts of our brain, to the emotional parts, to the parts of our brain that are geared towards reflexive, evasive movement. And by virtue of the fact that it's unconscious, people constantly forget about sound and music. They constantly forget about it. It's always an afterthought. And so I always tell students that we have to make our peace with that as audio people. And I think consider it part of our job to continue to kind of make it conscious again and remind people of the role that it plays and how important it is on an emotional level to bring meaning and a kind of memorable effect to every experience that you're having. And it's incumbent on us as audio people to have the directors that we work with and the audiences that we speak to really get them to take that on board of quite how important audio is, even though it's subconscious.
And even if you think about it from a fundamental standpoint, when you putting on a VR headset, you're basically truncating our strongest sense, which is sight. And so no longer can you rely on peripheral vision. It's very much, it's redactive in a way. And so, yeah, so true with the evangelism statement there, but it's almost like every time we have to prove the worth of spatial audio and its necessary existence within, an experience, and one where it's I like to argue that it's more than half of the experience. It's 51%. Because
That's
if
right.
you don't, maybe I'll push it to 55. It's 55%. Because if you can't also locate things within the space, you're going to miss out on a ton of content, especially for people who haven't maybe done VR before, and they forget that there's a whole additional 180 degrees behind them.
One other comment on the definition. I don't know if this actually technically counts as part of the definition, but our definition certainly extends to how we use the high fidelity sound to have the spatial sound around you, and you have that sense, but it really is also how it relates to other people around you. So it's the volume as they get closer and where that volume occurs as they move in your vicinity. And also as Philip was saying, it's the scale. So it's one thing if you have, like, you're listening to music like this, or you're listening to cars move around, a couple of them. But when you have 200 people in their avatars, all having conversations, and out of the far end of your right ear, you might hear a little murmur, but it doesn't bother you because you just have a sense of being in a cocktail party, but you're here talking, but your body is kind of, and your emotions are kind of tuned to the idea that you're in a social environment, and it just convinces you that you have been there. And then what happens is that short-term memories move to long-term memories in a very different way. The way that context actually starts to implant them, and you believe you had an experience.
An example in theatre where I feel like it shows where it proves just how important sound can be is there was a show at the National Theatre called Anna, which was sound designed by Max and Ben Righam, who do a lot of stuff in binaural. And they had the main character had binaural microphones in her ears. So it's kind of a high fidelity experience in some ways, because as she walked around and interacted with different characters, you got her experience as an audience member with headphones on, and you got to hear kind of her perspective of her night at this at a party. And they dotted speakers around the space. So as she kind of moved from space to space, there were just these really kind of subtle changes that made you be able to kind of clock where that character was on stage. But yeah, that was a really sort of mind-blowing experience for me, seeing binaural be done on stage where maybe that visual element doesn't match up in the same way as if you're in a VR experience and you're listening and you're kind of the point of view character, but just hearing the perspective of a character walking around on stage was really interesting.
Yeah, and it becomes a truly embodied experience at that point as well, which I love. Eric, you touched on something that I wanted to dive into next, actually, and that is with our transition from working out in the workplace to now everything being centered around the home and working from home. We've seen kind of this exponential rise of audio-centric apps. You've got Clubhouse, you've got all of Clubhouse's copycats, and then you have the issue of the video call or the Zoom meeting. And I would love to know just how within these experiences can we use audio to help us better communicate with each other, connect with each other, and what's the future for that, and how can we better work with the tools that we are now using predominantly?
Well, I think it's super important, and we've never had a better sample size statistically to actually test it. That nobody knew that suddenly we'd be swamped with a completely new way of interacting with one another for work, for play, for social, for everything. And obviously what happened was we were unprepared because we hadn't really built a lot of the innovation and tools necessary that would catch up with our biology. So we just took what we knew, which was video conferencing, and we threw it up there, and it was pretty good. And Zoom was the easiest to use of those out there, and it just took off. And at first it seemed fine, like a lot of things do at first. But what happened at scale as people started to use it, not just for an hour here and there, but to really the predominant part of their days, is that it became evident that there was a biological reason that people were getting exhausted and frustrated and feeling trapped. And one of those reasons is you are trapped. You're trapped in a box You're being forced into a fight or flight type biological reaction where when you're staring for a long period of time into someone's eyes, you're not sure if you should beat them up or run away, but you're not definitely, you know that you shouldn't just be standing there. So you start to get distracted. And so then you lose the memories and you lose the focus and you lose attention. And eventually it creates fatigue. And it's a real biological phenomenon. It's not just people getting sick of doing the same thing over and over. And so what's happened with the rise of spatial video is spatial audio is that people started to realize, well, okay, well, what if we just started to play with this? What if we freed you from the box, let you move around a little bit, and let you have a sense that you were somewhere and you had some agency to you? And that became interesting. And there was a lot of ventures that with breathless anticipations came out and said, oh, now we can move around and we can have parties. The problem with that is they didn't have very good audio. They didn't have high fidelity. High fidelity was the best of them, and it's being refined and now has really emerged, I think, as the leader. But when you take normal audio and you just move it around on a JPEG, it's okay, but it gets pretty gimmicky. Like you really need that sense of like we can talk over one another, we can clap, and we're not going to be broken out. So the brain doesn't have that dissonant effect and start to get headaches and say, well, wait a minute, this isn't real. So what we've done is we've taken what we think is that, I think, correct 51%, necessity, and put around it a sense of adventure and spontaneity where you can build anything and on any device, then go in. I don't care if it's an Oculus or a phone or a laptop, you can then go and explore and find other people and build whatever you want. And I think that's where we're heading, is the metaverse. The original metaverse in my mind, even before Second Life, was the World Wide Web. It's just people building things and other people going to them, and it just grows like mad from the ground up. I think we're at the verge of that now with using web technologies like high fidelity. Actually, you don't need a plugin. You just go to a website. So taking these web technologies and now allowing that to become a deeper experience and more physically satisfying and less fatiguing is really the future of work, the future of healthcare, medicine, education. It's going to lead into every aspect of our lives.
And Philip, as the creator of the said tool, what have been some of the challenges and breakthroughs over these years, in building it?
Well, we started working on it because of the VR revolution. Initially, when High Fidelity started, we were building technology to enable a new Second Life-like platform that would let everybody get in a space together wearing headsets. But as you can imagine, one of the elements of that was sound, because we now knew that, happily enough, we knew which way your head was turned. That was a first. We never knew where your head was turned. And so we said, well, let's build the needed technology so that if a bunch of people are standing around in a virtual world with these head-mounted displays on, they hear each other coming from the correct place. And that's true even when they're doing this, and so we built all this core technology around that. And then in about 2019, we decided that the VR headset was just not going to get to a broad enough level of public usage that we could do what we wanted to do, which was make a kind of an open space that was hopefully kind of generically usable to people socially. And so we started working on, as Eric said, we started working on just taking the audio for people talking to each other in a very high quality way and making it work on a web page initially, so you can move around. The biggest problem that we're running into, which is a huge problem right now, is that you can't experience spatial audio if you're on a mobile device and you're using your mouth. If you're talking, unfortunately, the current state of Bluetooth and the Apple AirPods and Macs and everything else is that the sound drops to mono and low quality when you're using your mouth and when the microphone is turned on. So the big problem that we face right now is that we've built all this anticipatory technology that allows hundreds of people to talk to each other naturally in a space. But as of today, for the most part, we still have to get you on a laptop or a PC with something like what I've got on now turned on. So that's the big challenge that I see. But that challenge is only going to be a challenge for about a year because Bluetooth to get updated. And as you said, as we've been talking about, COVID and the experience we've had the last year has only, with certainty, accelerated, those types of changes. But that's the big one that I see, the big problem. And the opportunity, on the other hand, is huge. Hearing people correctly as if you were sitting in the room with them is super amazing and is one big aspect of spatial audio.
Philip, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can.
My question is, does your tool set, your high fidelity tool set, is it readily applicable to the kind of real-time awareness that I expect to see with good AR systems? I think particularly of audio AR as being extremely powerful and actually a lot closer than good AR headsets with visual displays. But using audio, 360 audio, as a method of not just enhancing context awareness, but having various kinds of audio data feeds spatially located around you to your preferred orientations and vectors. I think that's going to be ubiquitous, and this is the kind of strategic consulting I do right now. I wonder how your system applies to that.
Works great. We designed it initially for VR headsets. And so what we do is we take all the audio, the thing that's a bit different, like we're talking about our different systems here. The thing that we do is we take everybody's microphone audio and we send it to the cloud. Now, normally when you're using something like this call, if we all talk at the same time, you get one version of each of our audio coming down to you, and your computer has to badly add those all together at the same time. And to make that a bit more efficient, Zoom kind of helps out, so to speak, by turning off everybody else's sound. So if I just sit here and talk and you guys try to add in something, you can't, as we all know, because you are all kind of pushed down by me having the talking stick on Zoom. What we do to fix that is we take all that audio up to the cloud, and then we process this magical head-related transfer function, which I saw mentioned in the chat, that makes this particular sound for your ears, that positions it exactly as your head is turned. And then we send that back to everybody as a stereo stream. So you only get one audio stream, or a stereo audio stream, coming back from the cloud. And what's cool about that is it moves toward this vision for audio working the right way, where you can inject hundreds or thousands of different sounds into a space, and then you sort of sample that space, if you will, by sticking your head in there and saying, my ears are this way, and you get back this stream that gives you the sound. So for AR glasses, yeah, it was designed for that, and we have an API now that enables it to be put into anything, and we look forward to getting it turned on basically for all these devices.
If I could also speak to Clark's point briefly, because I think it's a nice entrance into the role of sound in AR in augmented reality, which is not necessarily quite as clear, and I mean, for myself, I make a definition that virtual reality is fundamentally experiential. You're 100% in it. Whereas augmented reality is an overlay and has this role of being, if you like, informational. And with that in mind, I agree. I think spatial audio has a very important role to play. And one of them in particular that I've been thinking a lot about is something I call object sonics, which is, if you like, a sonic equivalent to how the first Mac, once they'd bought the operating system of Xerox, launched this graphic interface. And instead of having, DOS, you had something that looked like a garbage can, and something that looked like a folder, and something that looked like a file. And all of this kind of went from there and then became skeuomorphic and all of that. And in that context of all these new burgeoning AR spaces, I think part of the role of sound, as it has been and as it continues to be in film, television, radio, and all media, is to help the audience figure out what the hell is going on and what do things represent. And I think that, in a sense, by thinking in terms of attributing a particular quality of sound, like, it'd be lovely if, there were even some kind of rough standardization of that, of an object in the AR space, starts to tell people, okay, I know what I am and I know what everything does. And I think that's a role that it can and should begin to play. And, you know, as Philip has mentioned, we have the ability to do this and have had for a little while. It's fairly easy to do, you know, particularly when you're working from, you know, from game engine type situations where, you know, you have an object of sound and it's reactive and it'll move around and do things that you want. So this kind of like informational guide function of spatial audio in augmented reality, I think is something we shouldn't be overlooking. Absolutely not.
One area that's really interesting me at the moment is the geolocated sound walk. And if anyone is interested in that, there's loads of free software out there. There's a really good company called Echoes, which is UK based. And there's an example of a sound walk is in Regent's Park in London. There's one called Music for Trees, where I can't remember if it's one composer or a series of composers have composed pieces about trees inspired by specific trees in that park. So as you kind of walk up to different trees, you get this music, and it's just this. It's a really exciting, I guess, development in audio technology, because you get these really personal experiences where, as the listener, you get to choose how you experience the music and in what order. And later the GM hopefully doing that with a story. So you walk around a part of London and you hear little snippets of stories, and there are also actors on the street, and you get that kind of interactive, I guess it's augmented reality, but also with actual reality, and those kind of interacting, and how you can tell stories through that in ways that I guess are different from the conventional storytelling form, where you start at A and you end up B, and instead you get the sort of user, where the audience kind of chooses their story.
I was going to say also, with the rise of spatial audio, we also saw the sort of title of an audio director within a production happen, where the director's working more closely with the audio director about how to lead the audience through the story. Because you can't, you know, when you're in a sandbox and you're in a 360 environment, you can't really rely on editing to direct where the person looks. And so sound is a very effective tool in the director's toolkit to nudge the person on a journey in a 360 environment. So for instance, if you're looking in front of you and there's a big scene happening on Mars with Mars rovers, but a door slams behind you, you're going to look back and you are going to have inadvertently led that viewer on a new path. And so we've seen how directors work much closer with sound designers, and the rise of the sort of title, the audio director, which I find really interesting, and speaks to what you were saying, Hayden, how important sound has become in these mediums.
Yeah, definitely. And something else I'd like to kind of orient ourselves towards here is thinking about kind of this current state of the industry, right? So we've the most recent resurgence of VR hit around 2015, 2016. We've seen several waves within that, the coming and going of different tools, different companies, and everything in between. And I'm really curious, you know, with a lot of productions halting and different forms of content coming to the forefront, like you were saying, Alice, with binaural walks or content having to go online or live stream, how has this shift and quarantine in general limited or expanded the work you've been doing? And have you been able to really dive into any personal explorations because of that?
Yeah, I guess for me, so for the theatre industry, it was, as with a lot of industries, it was hit really hard. And according to the UK's big freelance report, 94% of the work created for the UK stages are entirely reliant on freelancers. And I think freelancers in the UK were very badly hit. And just particularly for the first few months, the industry just kind of disappeared and funding disappeared. But once funding started coming back, particularly for me as a composer and sound designer, I was in a very lucky position where we were able to adapt to online audio pieces, to binaural, to exploring these technologies, and it kind of opened up this whole new world of how to tell stories and how to, I guess, engage with audiences. And I think a lot of people started experimenting with that, and it was a really fun way to reach audiences and give them these kind of individualized experiences. Yeah, an example of a show that I really enjoyed was one called Swimming Home, which was by Bristol or Vic, where it was a binaural audio piece that you listened in your bathtub about swimming. And me and my whole family got involved. So my grandma kind of got in her swimsuit, and you go in your bathtub, and it's about swimming, and particularly missing swimming now that swimming pools weren't open. Yes, I feel like they're binaural and spatial audio, and having these experiences where you create really intimate sound where you can speak directly to that person and sort of be in their brain and be in the surroundings is a incredibly powerful way to interact during this time where liveness isn't possible or not in the same way as before.
We've had a similar kind of trajectory to Alice, that, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, everything just kind of contracted away and every job was cancelled. And then I think people, you know, started to realize that there were certain things that we could continue to do remotely, and we got more adept at doing it. And the work started coming back in, and some of it was remarkably interesting. And maybe projects that might not otherwise have seen the light of day, because there seemed to be room to woodshed and take a more artistic approach to things, because we needed to fill up our time. And, you know, and so we ended up having one of the best years we've ever had. And similarly, large numbers of people were ordering the Quest 2 when it came out, and it was selling out. And I hear from a lot of friends who never even mentioned VR as long as I've known them. All of a sudden, they're asking me for recommendations, and I'm trying to stay up to date of, you know, what games or what experiences they should do. So in a kind of weird and ironic way, the VR industry, which was in a sense in a fair amount of trouble before the pandemic, because brands had realized, and they've been funding it for a while, brands had realized that there were not enough headsets in houses to make it worth their while. They weren't reaching enough people. And so everyone was kind of pivoting, as Hayden and I were mentioning, pivoting towards location-based situations. So you go to a mall and you go into Dreamscape or whatever it is and have some virtual reality experiences. And so instead of, you know, can't bring it to them in their houses, we bring them to us. And then everything flips during the pandemic again, where we cannot go out, and where the sensation of isolation is real, and where almost the opposite. People used to complain that VR was isolating as an experience, but there it is somehow becoming expansive, so that you can find yourself climbing Mount Everest, you can visit Polynesia, you can be swimming under the water with blue whales, or you can be, you know, katana sorting fruit at full size with Fruit Ninja and all of that. So in a weird sense, the pandemic has breathed some life back into the VR industry, and I think also into the sense of risk-taking that art and creativity necessitates. And so I think it's an oddly positive thing, and I'm excited to see where it'll go next, because I don't think any of us know anymore. We really don't know what will happen, you know, once everything opens up. Will people just enjoy the world so much that VR becomes irrelevant? Or now that they have Quest 2s in their house, will they make use of them? And if so, for what? Will they bring on board High Fidelity's software and eclipse Zoom by all of a sudden having these social gatherings where everybody can clearly hear each other and it reflects exactly what we know as reality?
I was going to add that we also saw the rise of remote collaboration platforms like Evercast, and a lot of other companies open to evaluating the idea of virtually attending mixes. So being able to mix films or VR or any medium for that matter, but remotely with teams of people with an IMU on your head, being able to virtualize cinema sound, in our case, using the Mark I Spatial SDK, and each member of the team being able to have the same mix and sign off on whatever version that everybody liked. And that was something that I think everybody before was like, no, mixing, you have to be in the same studio. It's a physical thing. You've got to go there. But with the pandemic, there was this sort of moment where people were like, oh my God, we have to mix. We need some standards and best practices in our audio pipeline. And we don't know how to do that. There's people in different locations with different headphones, and we all need to be able to sign off on the same mix. How do we do that now that we can't go into the Dolby studio? And we were able to get those evaluations and start working on those pipelines and start doing virtually attended mixes where the cinema sound is virtualized in the headphones using our SDK. And I think that that might not go away because it actually works and has created a lot of efficiencies and interoperability of assets and things like that. And I don't think that would have happened as fast without the pandemic.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. And yeah, remote collaboration, being able to bring people in and listen to the same thing and sign off on it. Yeah, that's also a huge side of it. I think is not the first thought on people's minds. I'm sure that was kind of panic mode hit where you can't pile everyone in for a late night mix session. But something that I'm sure will really transform the way that, or allow for more creativity when it comes to that final part of the creative process. I'm also curious too, jumping more into NFT territory now, what kind of audio assets, Eric, do you see people bringing into this space? What kinds of things do people want to share?
Well, we're really seeing a revolution in that regard. I haven't seen this much activity around a topic since the World Wide Web came around. And I think we're going to see a similar trajectory because like the web, everybody jumps in and then there'll be some disillusionment like pets.com doesn't work, so therefore the internet's not interesting. And then it crashes. So what's happening now is everybody who's got a crayon and a pen and a piece of paper will scribble something and see if they can get $1 million for it. So there's trillions of objects being essentially NFTized and put into these things for a lot of get-rich-quick schemes, a lot of wash trading to make it seem like there's activity around things, and a lot of fake blockchains to make it seem like they're decentralized. And so what's happening is a recognition already, like in record time, I thought it would take a little longer, that the value of an object is not going to be its scarcity, because there's going to be a lot of scarce things. It's going to be the story around it. It's going to be the narrative, the magic, and the human experience that touches that story. That's what makes it a treasure. And so what we're seeing now is what we've been spending the time on, thankfully for years, is to enable these objects with 3D graphics, sound, animation, and I would say personality. So how do they change if it's raining outside? How do they change if it's the creator's birthday? What happens if you combine two together? What happens if they're alive and have artificial intelligent brains? We have butterflies that can fly around and look at Google Maps and decide whether if they like pizza, they'll go from place to place, or if they like the Jets and they score a touchdown, they'll drop Starbucks on the ground and people can pick them up. So they start to have a lot of different interesting qualities and an open canvas now for artists. And the most important thing that we're seeing is how people start to create these experiences with sound. So as you get closer to them, it's not just that it gets louder, but they might also do different things. And they're not also stationary, they're moving. So now you have objects that are moving with different types of sound that are different in relation to where you are in proximity to them in augmented and virtual reality. And I'll just mention, like, we talk a lot about like, well, virtual realities like this and augmented realities like that. The way we see it going is that these things merge. And they move away from being kind of a gimmick of a silo in a game to being persistent metaverses. So you might have a butterfly that's floating around in a virtual reality environment and finds a wormhole and goes out into Central Park in New York in an augmented reality situation. And it's only, that object can only be in one place at one time. And its behaviors, what it sounds like when it flutters, and how it screams in joy when it sees the sun, whatever it does, those behaviors are embedded in the object itself, including its ability to make sound and react to sound. Not just make sound, but react to sound and react to other people, both what they're saying, what they're doing, and what it finds around it. So it's a massive landscape for artists and creators to really come up with new types of experiences that we've never been able to achieve before. So I see that happening right now. And because of the financial incentive, that's what usually drives industries, people are really getting into it because they can make money. So moving from instruments of speculation to instruments of engagement and creativity are now creating a different form of art. It's very exciting.
You're right, the money never hurts. And I love that it's such a dynamic experience that can also involve many people, even if it's just one singular owner, touching on that scarcity aspect. Oh. So that being said, what else do we see as being next for spatial audio? I'd love to hear from everyone. And what do we think needs to happen to get us from where we are now and all of the advances that have been made, especially over the past year, and move us or continue to move us towards a place of mass adoption?
I'll just like to say one word on that, because I think actually Philip will have a lot better things to say than me. I just want to say one thing, which is a frustrating thing for me about where we are and where we need to go, is simply that you need headphones. And it's very hard to get people to wear headphones. I don't know why it's that hard. You are, thank you. But you can ask them, you can beg them, you can enforce it, you can go to their house and tell them to, but a good percentage don't. And so if we can get some advances in, I don't know if we have to make them more comfortable or just make them easier to slide on and off. I don't know what it is, but it matters a lot. It matters for feedback. It matters for the quality of the spatial sound and getting the full effect of it. So for me, that's one of the things. Yes, it's almost impossible to get people to wear virtual reality headsets for any long period of time, but even headphones for mass adoption, you really have to get better at making them just second nature for the average person.
Or using open headphones, so almost like AR headphones where you're pulling in from that to create or to dissolve that barrier a bit more.
Absolutely. I mean, Philip, you might have some comment on this because high fidelity is very dependent on headphones for a good experience.
Right. Well, as I touched on earlier, the first order problem that's almost just such a big, dumb problem, it's boring, is just that we need stereo headphones when our microphones are on, as I said. And if you don't have wired headphones, you have Bluetooth, you don't have stereo right now. So that needs to get fixed. I think more subtle things, though, are we as humans have these magical, extraordinarily sensitive ears, and we're tuned not to, we don't create any echo in the real world. We suppress the sound of our own voice. The kickback delays off the walls and stuff are small enough, and we've engineered we've evolved ourselves to not hear them. Miking people is also a difficult problem. You see the microphone that I'm sitting in front of, and that is very intentional. Since I use high fidelity all day long, I have the opportunity to do a lot of meetings where I'm talking. I can talk much more warmly and intimately to people, but it does require a good microphone. And this is a big, silly thing. And the technology of, that the AirPod microphones are terrible. We all know that. You've noticed that. The old wired ones, where you can just hold the little microphone in front of your mouth, are much better than the AirPod ones. So there's some technology problems with just miking as well. There's been some nice work done in AI on that, excluding background sounds and focusing on the voice array microphones, which the MacBooks have in them now, but they're still not good enough. So that'll be another interesting thing. I think it's solvable, but it's a pretty daunting problem. And as we touched on before, only with the full range of our voices can we really communicate as we were meant to. There's a sort of an uncanny valley effect to audio. if you will, that is similar to the often discussed uncanny valley problem with avatars. And also, I think now that we've learned with COVID with video, our voices do need to be preserved pretty well to allow, and then transmitted with low latency to allow us to, have a natural experience. So a lot of little factors like that need to get built. I also just look forward to the networks getting a bit faster. As you may know, the critical delay from my mouth to your ears, which allows you to speak naturally to me, is a very precise number. It's a very sharp number that's been tested by scientists a number of times historically, and it's about 180 milliseconds, about a fifth of a second. If the delay from my mouth to your ears is less than that, we can talk naturally. If it's longer than that, as it is often in a venue like this, we have to wait and be painfully polite and not communicate normally with each other. So latency is something that people often don't talk about in these areas because we're not really thinking about it that much. We're as we try to apply things like phenomena like spatial audio and high quality audio to speaking, we have to consider latency as well.
If I can, one thing we're looking forward to as a potential development in spatial audio is that in VR and any headphone experience, the binauralization comes about based on something we referred to before, and Philip mentioned the head-related transfer function, which is a generalized set of measurements of how quickly a sound hits one ear relative to the other ear, how it reflects, and the harmonics that are created through the shape of your pinna on the outside of your ear, and your upper torso, the shape, and how the frequencies is affected by the sound traveling through your head and then coming out the other ear. And all of these make up what we call a head-related transfer function. But as is obviously clear, we all have different shaped heads and ears and torsos and shoulders. And so the assumption that one generalized HRTF to rule them all is a very big limiting factor in terms of how well any other person, any given person, can position in space where a sound is. So let's say we measure Alice's individualized HRTF, and we apply it, if you like, as a profile to her phone or to any of the apparatus devices that she uses to listen to music or spatial audio. She'll have ideally a perfect representation of where sound is very accurately. If then I take Alice's profile and apply it to mine, which is basically what we're doing right now with our generalized HRTFs, it's not going to work for me as well because I have a different shaped head, I have different shaped ears. So something we're looking forward to is the possibility of measuring personalized head-related transfer functions, and that be built in somehow into the profile of our listening devices. And with that, we can then maybe triple or quadruple the kind of resolution, the kind of acuity with which we can pinpoint sounds. And there's different approaches. We encountered one company that was using basically photographs and video to scan your ear like that with an iPhone. And from that, it could actually deduce a fairly decent hearing profile for you. So I think there is work being done in that area, and that's something that eventually we'd like to see. In as much as you have a fingerprint, you'll have a hearing print.
Definitely looking forward to that. Oh, please, Alice.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about from a kind of content creation angle, how to, I guess, yeah, as someone who has come to spatial audio more recently, it's really great having events like this happening, and I guess more workshops that demystify the process of creating work in spatial audio and in VR. And I think anything like that will bring more people into this industry and into this kind of content creation. And I think particularly as it becomes more popular and as technologies that become come on the market, and particularly free technologies or free versions of different softwares. Yeah, I would really love to see, and I think it is definitely happening, but an acknowledgement of the different inequalities in the sound industry. I think I was reading a report about 5% of producers in music being women, and equally for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people from those backgrounds. There's just less support, I guess, to push yourself forwards in these industries. So yeah, I'd love to see more stuff championing those voices and getting more people into this area of work. And yeah, also just thinking about accessibility and how this technology can be used for accessibility. So with my theatre company, we're trying to improve our practice by thinking about accessibility from a creative angle, rather than just at the end of a process going, oh, we need to do a audio description, or we need to do captioning, rather thinking about it at the beginning of the process and being like, how can we actually make an audio description that is really creative? And because for anyone who is listening to audio description, they've got like a clunky headphone that's really uncomfortable. It's usually, there's some mixing issues where the audio description will be at the same audio level as people on stage, and there'll be clashing sort of, the dialogue will overlap, and there's a lot of issues that don't get thought about, particularly by the creative team, and can sort of be outsourced to a different company who might not know the show very well. So just thinking about how, like, what role spatial audio could play in that, and if you could actually make a really exciting experience for anyone who does require audio description. And yeah, I guess, like, how could you have binaural in that experience, and yeah, making it something really interactive and personalized as well.
Definitely. And that's something that's always extremely important to highlight, because just as audio is oftentimes kind of thought of at the end of a production cycle, so is making it accessible and readily available for all audience members. Yeah, so thank you for that. Well, I think this concludes at least my questions that I had for the panel tonight. I know I've been seeing some questions in the chat, and I'd love to open up to the audience. So Ray, I guess I'll popcorn over to you, since you've got that list in front of you.
Yeah, definitely. Susan awesome. And I kind of keeping track of the chat in the background. And yeah, there's been some good questions, but similarly, feel free to write your questions in the chat, or otherwise, I think there's a raise hand feature as well if you want to use that. Otherwise, also I want to say thanks to Alice. Alice is actually joining us from the UK, so it's really early in the morning. So she's gonna pop off now. But let's thank Alice for joining, and what a wonderful panel.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I thought there was a really interesting question kind of early on from Alan Chidnow, asking about the extent that spatial audio impacts the body in addition to the ears. Like, what sort of effects does spatial audio have on you, the listener, other than just listening?
And Joel, also, if you remember the LinkedIn post about the vibrations and accessibility, you might want to tie it back to that as well.
Yeah, so back to what I was kind of saying earlier, if we look at hearing as being, several steps further in the evolution of a vibration sense, or what we now call haptics, and we make a distinction. But a long, long time ago, they were the same thing. An earthworm, for example, senses vibration. You could say, in a sense, that it hears things that are coming and can take evasive action. When we think about sound, this question came up on when Susan posted this on LinkedIn, where she was kind of championing the role audio and spatial audio to bring meaning and emotion, to experiences. Someone remarked that, well, how can that encompass people who are unable to hear? And it's, it's obviously a fair point, but we work in the audio industry, so obviously we're primarily going to be catering to people, who can hear. But that aspect of sound, which is a vibration, is still accessible to us. And the experiences of many people who, who really can understand a sonic experience by being close to a speaker, feeling something, and can reach quite incredible heights in terms of their ability to discern different kinds of sounds and have a satisfying experience. And I think so it's incumbent on us then as sound people that if we want to encompass deafness and still be able to reach that we factor that in, and that we can create more haptic pathways and represent energy in the higher frequencies, have them repeat in the lower frequencies where they translate more easily to vibration. So, in summation, it's like I don't make a division between sound and vibration. It's all the same thing.
I see there's a question in the chat here from Philip Lelyveld. Unless I've got it wrong, please correct me. NFTs can be used to assign ownership, but the asset itself can be pirated and or freely available outside the crypto, competing with the NFT'd object. So I will correct you somewhat there, only in the sense that on one level, the asset itself can be pirated, i.e. you can take a picture of it, or you can get certain assets related to the object. Same way you can take a picture of the Mona Lisa, as the often quoted analogy goes, but it's not the same. The idea of the NFT is that it has an associated ledger entry in a blockchain that absolutely proves without any shadow of a doubt that there's only one, and the assets associated with that particular token are the only ones that's the real one. Counterintuitively, you would say, well, why does it matter if it's the real one? Because I can make 1,000 copies of the assets associated with it. But that isn't pirating it. That's simply making copies of the assets that you can claim you have, but it's not the same value. And what the NFT revolution or the NFT value chain is showing is that people care whether it's the original or not, the same way they do with physical art. And that's going to hold for sound as well. These objects are associated with original compositions, for instance, say original song. And you can copy the song and make an MP3, but it's not the only original endorsed version, and therefore it will trade less and be less worthy to collectors. And so that is the difference. It's not piratable in the traditional sense.
Yeah, and NFTs are white hot right now. So if that's a topic you guys are interested in us kind of diving deeper on, let us know. We can put together an event around that. Danielle, sorry.
Hi everyone. There was a lot of talk about VR goggles. I'm just wondering what people are thinking about AR eyewear coming out, and thinking about what Eric mentioned, that perhaps, if we need to get people to wear headphones, do you think there might be a better chance that if there's some really good AR eyewear that, people are walking around the city with outdoor type AR museums and all these kinds of things, that maybe would be a great place for spatial audio to happen?
Yeah, I noticed that. What is it like? I think the Bose glasses. One of the major manufacturers recently discontinued their device, but then I think someone else kind of sprung up in their place. Are the glasses you're wearing right now those glasses, by the way?
No, these are just regular glasses.
They look like they have that kind of look of like the Bose glasses,
That'd be awesome, though. No.
I was trying to find mine. I have them somewhere here, and we did actually quite a lot of work with them, including a show in New York City, which had great potential, but ultimately was a complete disaster. But nothing to do with the Bose headphones. And it was exactly that, Danielle, that you would wear the glasses. They have the built-in, pretty decent quality speakers that can convey sound, spatial sound directly to you. And what we were able to do was create an experience that was, we worked on it with some of the guys from Sleep No More, that is in part out there and speaker-based and actual actors. And in part, you have this internal experience that is conveyed by the Bose frames. And each person that entered the experience would have a different take on it. And so one of the things we did, for example, is the actors were sitting at the piano playing a Chopin nocturne very beautifully. One person would walk in and they would hear something that was in tune with what she was playing, and everything would open up and seem kind of nice and beautiful. Another person would walk in and we created something that was just out of tune, just enough to be disturbing from what she was playing. And they would walk in and have this completely different perception of what was happening in the room. And so creatively, it opens up all of these kinds of possibilities, really fun things that one can do with it. I don't know why Bose pulled the frames for the time being. I hope it does come back. It showed great promise, and the technology was fairly adept. I just don't think people bought enough for them or got on board enough for them. It's again what happened with the Oculus Quests and the Oculus Goes, and maybe that'll change now. We all kind of lie in wait to see what Apple will bring us, obviously, because we know that they're devoting some time to this.
I was going to jump in and just speak about the Bose frames a little bit, because we actually helped them build Bose Radar, and the Bose frames were powered by Mark I Spatial SDK. So we work very closely with them. They actually haven't, those glasses are still available. What they terminated was, their initial approach was to build a community of content makers in Bose Radar, which was an app. And I think that just is what they discontinued. The glasses still exist. There's still many business B2B projects happening within Bose, some of which we are involved with. So they're still very much involved in spatial audio, and the sunglasses are very much available. But, like you said, with the Apple EarPods coming into the space, I think that really justified to a lot of clients, like how investing in a spatial audio project could really scale mass, because so many people have Apple EarPods. So that was really a sort of watershed moment, I think, during the pandemic, to hear that support came for spatial audio with Apple.
But Jackie, those didn't have any kind of AR capability, right? They were just sound.
Yeah, it was just augmented audio. There were use cases that were sort of utility, whether it was sort of guiding people along an audio UX with spatial as a way to navigate, as well as more sort of entertainment projects like Joel had mentioned. We did a really great project for Tribeca Film Festival with Jessica Brillhart and Yo-Yo Ma called Into the Light, where you literally physically had a visceral experience of his music and could walk towards him and away from him and things like that. So yeah, no audio, no visual though, just audio.
But I think, as we all know, there is every expectation that Apple is going to release something, let's say within the year. We worked on a project with them that, obviously was shrouded in secrecy, but it was clear to us that there was, an interest in an AR version of iTunes, about the possibility of filming volumetrically bands and then having them perform in your living room. And I really do believe that's going to be a thing. I call it the tabletop concerts. And I saw a version, we did a little piece from Othello in volumetric. And it was the first time I'd seen it kind of like this, but then someone picked up an iPad and showed us an early miniature projection of Viola Davis doing a soliloquy on a tabletop this big, straight out of Star Wars. I tell you, it was just magic, and I think that kind of experience is really around the corner very soon.
Yeah, Susan mentioned it in the chat, and I kind of have the question too. Like when I use my Oculus Quest 2, like I don't wear headphones. You know, I use the kind of bone. What is it? The bone induction audio. How does input affect spatial audio?
Well, that wrecks the experience. That sound feeds back in your mic. So, like I was saying earlier, we've got this huge problem where we're not close coupled enough on the microphone and the headphones to do the right thing. So the things that are sort of playing audio at you that are audible externally are really problematic, both for your own microphone and then for other people that are nearby. The problem of having people in mixed, AR, VR environments while actually next to people in the real world is yet another nasty problem computationally that we've not yet taken on and solved. So we're just a little bit early on a lot of this stuff, but we're getting there. I think with respect to AR, the other challenge I would say for all of us to consider is that AR doesn't have a single obvious use case. That's one of the big challenges with it. It's a technological set of capabilities, but if I think about like what information would you like about yourself to be floating above your head that other people you don't know can see when they walk by you on the street? And of course the answer is the empty set. So it's one of the problems with designing for AR. We don't have a big use case yet, and that's why things like early devices don't succeed because they're not hitting a big simple use case like the web did.
Philip, if I can ask a question to you, actually, I'm curious what you think about bone conduction headphones, because I've been messing with them for the best part of 2 years, and there's pros and cons, but the idea that you can hear, and then you can hear the outside, and obviously it has an application if you're cycling or a pedestrian, that you can hear traffic and stuff like that. But it also has the potential to defeat feedback problems and stuff like that. I just don't know if it's there yet. I don't know if it's well enough.
Yeah, I'm not a hardware audio engineer. Why aren't they more successful? That does seem interesting. What is the frequency response? Is there like a hard roll off on it or something? I haven't used them enough.
It's pretty good. If you're in LA, I'll drop you some over. I have lots of pairs.
Cool.
Another issue too that we would always run into, specifically with virtual reality headsets, would be it really depends on where the experience or where you physically are when you're in the headset. So obviously now that everyone's at home, you can completely control the space, and if the embedded hardware is open and it's just beaming back into your ear like the Bose glasses do, or if it's just the like hockey pucks that that kind of hover over your ears. It's decent, but as soon as you were to take that headset, we just had countless events where we'd be trying this demo content for people, at meetups or at conventions. And as soon as you have any sort of external sound that's competing with the listener, and you don't want to put on headphones on top of that. It would be so clunky already putting the headset on somebody. Have wires everywhere, especially with the earlier headsets. And so it would just be disappointing because you'd barely be able to hear the mix. And there goes, the hours and hours of work that went into carefully spatializing it and crafting an experience. So that's also been something that, kind of feeds into everyone should have a pair of wired or killer, headphones that they always carry around with them, almost, as much as your phone is always attached to you at the hip.
It was really soul crushing to see a docent put the headphones on back to front, and you're like, oh my God, there goes your whole experience.
And then counting down and seeing how long it takes them to recognize if it even.
Yeah. You started tagging left.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. We're pretty much at the top of the hour, so Hayden, everyone else in the panel, why don't you tell us how we can get a hold of you after this event, and we'll kind of synthesize it and send that information out if you don't catch it while they tell you.
Definitely. So my company, Nocturnal, it's spelled with a VR in the middle. We're at www.nocturnal.com. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at nocturnal_audio.
For us, it's Echo VR, spelled ECCO VR.com. And you can reach us through there. And we also have Echo VR Instagram and Facebook.
My company's website is highfidelity.com, and you can create a space and invite your friends into it and do something quite similar to what we've been doing today. You know, everybody can stand around and have a party and hang out and talk to each other. So you can give it a try on our site, and we have an API for companies that want to embed it in their own software, which is what we put up a couple months ago.
You can reach,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you can reach Mark 1 at whatsup@mark1.tech. I'd be happy to extend any composers or artists in the audience like a free license to try out Mark 1 spatial system. We also on Twitter and Instagram under Powered by Mark 1. And you can reach me at Jackie@mark1.tech. That's JACQUI@mark1.tech. Thanks.
And I'm Eric Poulier, and my company is the product of my company. The company overall is called Atomic. The product is called Spatial Web. You can find it at www.spatialweb.net. And just as you can go into High Fidelity and get a rendition of that and play with the High Fidelity capability in 2D on High Fidelity and get the API, you can go to Spatial Web and you can check out the High Fidelity sound in 3D over there. And so go to www.spatialweb.net and get yourself an account and play around with it and invite your friends.
Fantastic. Well, hey, everyone, thanks for joining us. Susan, you're around here, right? Well, you want to tell our guests about our upcoming events?
Yes, in May, we're going to be having an event that focuses around user experience design. And we're going to be bringing in guests talking about various types of input and sensors and how that changes or impacts what makes available the user experience. Also in the way that reading in this data allows us to, customize and enrich the experience. So we have someone from a haptics company coming. We have HP Omnicept is going to be, I think, shipping around that time. And so we have someone from there, which if you don't know, they have a bunch of sensors on the headset that can do heart rate, and it has a camera that can not only track where you're looking, but also like your pupillary expansion and contraction. So we're pretty excited about that and what they're doing with that technology. And then I'm hoping to get someone in brain-computer interface and also possibly someone in IoT and sensors in the environment, and what that whole feedback loop is. So that's still in development, but that's essentially what we're going to be talking about.
So yeah, you'll get an email from us at the end of this if you got a event or Eventbrite ticket, and that'll have our information with our mailing list as well as the details from the speakers today. So that way you can keep track of what we're doing, and hopefully we'll see you next time. One big thanks. I mean, thanks to Susan, my co-partner in all this, but thanks to Serge Andrade, one of our volunteers. So it's really because of him and his passion with audio that made this event go from an idea to it actually happening. So it's fantastic for us to be able to kind of spread around the responsibilities and the ideating for these events. So let's see what we come up with next. Everyone, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you. Great to see some of you that we haven't seen in a while.